Believe it or not, this is a commercial lawnmower and it's from a decent brand, at least that's what they tell me. And as with most commercial mowers, these need maintenance, but do you need to take them into a service center to have it done, or can you do it yourself? But after the last service this one had, you might want to reconsider taking it anywhere else. In today's video, we're going to be taking a second look at this Toro lawnmower from almost 2 years ago. And the problem is that this mower is lightly used commercially, and to keep it running at its best, it needs to have its annual service. I don't get a chance to work on a lot of these, so it's always a real treat when they do come in. One of the biggest reasons you would want to keep this machine caught up on its maintenance is because these are extremely expensive to buy brand new. In fact, I've seen used cars priced the same as these, so it's in your best interest to keep them running well. So what's the plan for this lawnmower then? Well, it's fairly standard. We're going to change the oil, replace the spark plug, air filter, sharpen the blade, and finally replace the all-important oil filter. However, the oil filter will prove to be more of a hassle than you think, and it'll make sense here in a bit. If you've seen plenty of my videos, you'll know that I really do enjoy working on good engines, and I consider this one to be one of the best for this kind of application. You don't need this much engine to make it last a long time, but it certainly helps out. You can choose different ways to drain the oil from the engine, like tipping it over on its side. However, this time I'm choosing to just drain it with a hose because I don't want to make a mess. Unfortunately, things do end up getting a bit messy, but not for the reason you might think. Now, some consumers may not like this particular style of air filter housings, and I feel it's because they can come loose and get lost pretty easily. However, this style also makes it extremely easy to service as well. Now, this filter also uses a foam pre-filter to capture larger pieces of debris, which allows the paper filter to handle the finer particles. The filter also looks to be in great condition, and to be honest, if this was mine, I would just clean the foam filter and keep using the same paper filter. However, since this is not mine, I'll just do what they want me to, which is to replace it. But I am fairly certain that they would listen to me if I told them not to replace it. However, at the same time, I don't think I'd be comfortable taking on a liability. The spark plug looks a little bit worse than I like it to be, but it's not terrible either. There's probably about twice as much carbon on there as there should be, which could either mean it's burning oil or the air filter is clogged with dirt or wet with fuel. So here comes the part that was highly unexpected, and that was trying to take off the oil filter. If you didn't notice it, the oil filter housing is all plastic, which was more than likely done to save costs on manufacturing, but because it's plastic, it's also not very sturdy either. That means if the filter's on there way too tight like it is right now, you could break the housing. And if you do break it, it's going to cost between $35 and $60 to replace it. So yes, I could find a better way to stabilize the housing near the filter to keep it from breaking. But I've decided not to risk it and just take it off instead. That way I'll reduce the chances of it breaking. Now the strange part is that the bolts that hold the housing to the engine appear to have a lot of wear on them. My guess would be that I'm not the first person to take this part off to deal with a stuck oil filter. Either because the filter was stuck to it or to make sure they could tighten it up without breaking it. The one thing I'm quite certain about though is that whoever installed this filter was very upset and wanted to take it out on the filter. So once the filter is finally loose, we can then replace it with a new one. But before we do that, I would like to take the blade off and inspect it to see if it's been damaged. And if so, we can order it along with the other parts we need all at the same time. So there were a couple of tiny nicks on the cutting edge, but it's not bad enough to replace. We'll then sharpen the blade, reinstall it, and then wait for the new parts to show up in the mail. So the new parts finally showed up, and at the time, the oil filter was only $10 and the air filter and spark plug were both $7 each. Which brings the grand total to only $24, but that is before any taxes or shipping. However, I'm quite certain that if you do look around, you could probably find these parts for a lot less. I typically only buy from 1 or 2 vendors, so my options are quite limited. But I'll leave it up to you on who or what website you order your parts from. Just be aware that you don't get quality by paying for less, so do your best to find someone who's not as greedy as the other person. If you want, you're welcome to choose a different brand of spark plug. Just make sure it comes from a brand name you trust and have had good experience with. I know some don't prefer this brand because of experiences they've had with it, and I can understand it. Before installing the oil filter to the housing, I'm going to apply some oil to the rubber gasket to make it easier to install. I'm also going to fill the filter with some oil to help prevent a dry start, although I'm probably overthinking it. And because I'm in a pretty good mood and not angry, I'll tighten the filter by hand. But if you have a grip issue or have a hand injury, I'd recommend using a different method. Once I'm happy with how tight the filter is on the housing, I'll then install it back onto the engine. That's when I finally noticed the location of the oil drain plug. It was right behind the housing. Now that I know where it's located at, I've come up with a different approach to doing this job in the future. So from now on, I'm going to slightly tilt the mower up, take off the housing, followed by the drain bolt, install a drain tube in place of the bolt, and then lower the mower back down to the ground. And by the time I'm finished, most of the oil should be drained and ready for me to install the housing. Now doing it this way should be a better use of my time, which is always a plus. For the drain hose, they do make a kit for it, but I'll probably just come up with something else. It won't be anything elaborate, but instead something practical and more importantly free with stuff I have laying around. Be very careful not to overfill the engine with oil. Even though this has pressurized oiling, I'm sure too much oil will still affect how it runs. Also, from what I can tell, this primer bulb really does spray fuel into the engine. So be careful not to press it too many times as it could flood the engine and make it tough to start. To be honest, I'm not entirely happy with how this test run went. So first off, the engine was smoking more than I would want it to at the beginning, and secondly, it could be running a little bit better. Now I did check the oil level again and it was not overfilled, which could mean we have some piston ring wear. The other possibility is that there's some damage to the cylinder wall, which is not good news. And yet another reason why the engine could be running poorly is due to the valves needing adjustment. We'll have to check that when we get a chance, but what I typically find is that high quality engines like this one don't typically need adjustments unless the engine was neglected, which might be the case here. And if I had to guess, I think this engine might have missed a couple of maintenance cycles, which is why it's running the way that it is. We'll certainly have to do more testing with it, but for right now the customer is on a tight budget and even tighter schedule. So my question is, do you think there's more wrong with this engine, and if so, what do you think it is? If I had to guess, I'd say yes there is. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.